You're joking, aren't you? It's the Teesside Chef. Triple chocolate no-bake cheesecake that's perfect for any special occasion. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, I can't think of any more. And this recipe is a metaphor for life, really, but we'll get to that. So first for the base, I have 300 grams of Oreo biscuits, and that works out at 27 Oreo biscuits. And as I'm stacking these, they kind of remind me of poker chips, really, and I like a bit of Texas Hold'em, so I'll try my luck and go all in blind, and the theme of bad fortune that has coursed through my existence continues. But as that Penelope Cruz said in Vanilla Sky, every passing moment is another chance to turn it all around. So to that end, I will now blitz these 27 or 300 grams of Oreos into a fine powder in my food processor until they look a lot like this. And I need to bind all of this fine biscuit powder with 100 grams of melted butter, and I melted the butter very gently in the microwave on short bursts, but you can do it in a little pan, I suppose, with a little spoon if you like a little bit more fannying around. And then you just need to pulse this lot to bring it together until you have a nice thick texture that looks suitable for tarmacking your drive, although nobody tarmacs their drive anymore, do they? It's all fancy stone or poured resin these days. Bring back crumbling tarmac drives, I say. I have a standard 25 centimetre cake pan for my Oreo tarmac there, which must be lined first with baking paper, of course. And a very simple way to do this is to fold a sheet of baking paper into an arrow shape like so, measure it against the bottom of the tin, and then simply make a cut. And I remember doing this at school to make snowflakes for some reason, but you don't want to cut out any snowflakey bits here because that would kind of defeat the object of doing this, really, wouldn't it? The size looks good to me there, so I'll brush the bottom of the tin with melted butter to help my paper circles stick to the bottom, and then I'll brush the baking paper with melted butter to stop the biscuit base from sticking to the tin, and the butter provides stickiness in one context and yet prevents stickiness in another, and I don't really know why that happens. It just does. And the base must be very firmly pressed into the tin, and I'm going to smooth it out as best I can with an offset spatula. You can leave it like this if you like, but I prefer a crispy base to my cheesecake, so I'll put this lot on a baking sheet and bake in the oven at 175 degrees Celsius, 350 Fahrenheit, where it will only take 6 minutes to achieve this perfect crispy texture. And as the base cools, we can begin to create our chocolate cheesecake layers. The whole cake needs 600 grams of room temperature full-fat cream cheese, which needs to be beaten until smooth. Each layer will be done separately, but it's easier to prepare all of the cream cheese at once and then divide it up later. And I'll also do that with the 450 grams of double cream the cake needs by whipping it all to firmish peaks in one go. And like someone experimenting with sadomasochism for the first time, the cream is better slightly under-whipped than over-whipped, because I always feel that you should ease yourself into these things and remain in your comfort zone. And once whipped, keep the cream in the fridge. You might find you need to whip the bottom of the cream again later on, but that's enough stimulation for now. Let's get on with the chocolate. I have 200 grams each of white milk and dark chocolate here. And I'll snap 50 grams from each and put that to one side for reasons that will be revealed later. And as the white chocolate there is the first to go in, I'll begin processing the remaining 150 grams ready for melting, which I'll do over a pan of gently simmering water, although you could just melt your chocolate in the microwave in short bursts if you trust yourself to do that. And this was my attempt at a cool transition shot where the chocolate melts lusciously and delectably, and it didn't really turn out as I was hoping it would, but the chocolate still melted, so all is not lost. Each layer of the cheesecake has 200 grams of the beaten room temperature cream cheese, which must be folded comprehensively into 150 grams of the whipped cream before incorporating the 150 grams of chocolate. And you know, the layers in this recipe got me thinking how this triple chocolate cheesecake is kind of a metaphor for life. The first white chocolate layer represents childhood, all sweet and innocent, no bitterness, but lacking any kind of complexity, because kids just have vital ingredients missing, don't they? Plus they're all sticky like white chocolate, have far too much sugar, and if you have too much of them, you start shaking, you feel depressed and physically sick and just want to go to bed. Anyway, get your first layer straight onto your now cooled biscuit base and give it a bit of a shake to level it out before setting it in the freezer until firm on top. And you can have a break at this point with your head in your hands if you like, before making the second layer, which is almost the same. 200 grams of cream cheese, 150 grams of whipped cream, but milk chocolate this time. Most people's favourite layer, the milk chocolate layer. You've still got your sweetness, but you're a little more interesting with your melt-in-the-mouth good looks and generic mass appeal. But unfortunately, you don't last very long on the tongue before being swallowed up to provide energy to a system much more complex than you can possibly imagine. The cheesecake's back in. I've just had to check that the white chocolate layer is firm enough to take the second layer, which is going on now. You want to make each layer just before you add it to the rest because it will set quickly and will be more difficult to spread out, and as the chocolate gets darker, it gets more difficult to spread. So you may need help with the spreading. I'm using an offset spatula to assist me here before setting again in the freezer to firm up before adding the final layer, the dark chocolate layer, 200 grams of cream cheese again, 150 grams of whipped cream and 150 grams of melted dark chocolate this time. The final phase, maybe a little richer and luxurious for some, but most of the sweetness has faded away, and all you're left with is the bitterness now. There's a certain depth to this layer, but we must suffer the dark irony that the richest flavours in life come when we barely have the appetite to enjoy them, and like this cheesecake, we all end up flattened out in a mass-produced container before being stuffed into a dark hole never to return. You can set the cheesecake in the fridge now if you like, but freezing just means the whole thing is easier to deal with, especially if you want to remove it completely from the tin and present it on a cake board or similar. And it's much easier to remove that baking paper from the bottom if the whole thing is frozen, after which you can leave it in the fridge to thaw gently before serving. And as a final flourish, let's finally grate some of that 50 grams of each chocolate we reserved earlier onto the top, and this will act as a retrospective of our triple chocolate cheesecake odyssey. A chocolate requiem, if you will, or just some grated chocolate for those of you not buying into all this metaphorical nonsense. But whichever side of the fence you're on, I'm sure you'll agree that this no-bake, show-stopping dessert would make a stunning centrepiece for any occasion. And now we're nearly at the end of our journey. Let's leave the dark cynicism behind and celebrate what we've achieved, because it's only when we see the whole picture that we appreciate the bittersweet, layered beauty of our creation, the simple lightness, the interesting sweetness, and the eventual complexity, all blending together, a reminder that only by experiencing it all can you appreciate its full flavour. I'll see you next time, eh? Ta